To have you all here today. It's kind of a traditional foggy beginning of maybe summer, or is this just spring, I think? And we're happy to have you join us. Michael Fields is our speaker today. He's a founding member and former producing artistic director of Del Arte International for 45 years. He was also the director of California State Summer School for the Arts. He's the founder and director of Longshadr. How do you pronounce that?
You did it just right.
Longshadr. Okay. It sounds like Shatter. I
Yeah,
don't know
right.
whether it's
Exactly.
shattering our vision of reality. In any event, it's all yours now. You should tell people whether you want them to raise their hand or interrupt or put their comments and questions in the chat.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Jane, and thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, you can raise your hand. I've it's been a while since I've been zooming with people, but I do and yeah, if you have a question about anything, raise your hand, and I might ask you a question at the same time. Um,
And you can put it in the chat. And if you do that, if we're not paying attention to you and you put it in the chat, I will monitor the chat and
Thank you, Jane.
let
That's
Michael know.
great. That's great. So theater's in trouble, I think, across the United States and the world. Let's just start with that. And it's for a variety of reasons. But I left Del Arte 3 years ago, and it has been going through some serious trouble, trying to financially make it, set a new direction, make leadership transition, all of those things. But it's not endemic to just one organization. It's really all across the United States. And I've started following it and reading. A lot of people have been writing about it just because well, my life has been in this work. So, of course, I'm interested in what happens to it. And I was just talking with Jane before you all got here about now, I think it was the Spanish flu, the pandemic in the turn of the last century that nearly killed theater as we know it in this country. No one was going because if you went, you risked dying. Um, but after after that pandemic passed, theater came back much, much stronger. Within months, theaters were full. And I think this is a different situation because we had COVID, but I don't think COVID is the cause. COVID is the catalyst. COVID was something that made things that were already in motion go faster in motion. Um, and so right now, theater's going through, a dark night of the soul, as my friend would say. I don't think people are quite knowing how it's going to survive, what's going to happen to it, and in what form it might emerge. And I say all that as a context. My dog is walking away because she knows I'm talking now. As a context for what could come, what could be. Um, a couple of quick stories. When I left Del Arte, I was offered the opportunity to buy the Lager Bar. Wasn't something I dreamt of, wasn't something I'd wanted to do, but it was a compelling pitch that was made to me, and I've loved that bar for 40 years. It's not like I'm there every day, but it is a place that we used to write plays in there. It was part of the creative soul of what we did was based in that bar. And I know a few of you, because I recognize your names, have been in there. Julie Bird. So it's a place where it's like a living room for a community. And there's an Irish playwright. He's passed on, but his name was J.B. Keane. Um, and he owned a pub in Cork in Ireland. And because he came up and lived in Cork, he wasn't considered high enough class to write plays for the Abbey in Dublin, because Dublin's like New York City, it's the big city. And finally, one of his plays made it onto a big stage, and he became a huge sensation in Ireland. I saw one of his plays. I went to Ireland in 1981. I have some Irish family just to see what it was like. I was arrested by the British Army in Belfast for looking like a terrorist. And I said, how can, listen to me talk. Look, it didn't matter. It was night. It was the height of the troubles. And I walked right into the middle of it. And such is life, you know. But while in Dublin at the Abbey, I saw a play by J.B. Keane called The Chastitute. A chastitute is the opposite of a prostitute. It is a man who has never had sex. And this is relatively common in the rural families in Ireland, the oldest son in particular. So this guy goes to Dublin, this is what the play is about. He goes to Dublin and he sees women really for the first time. And every time he sees a beautiful woman, a priest flies through the stage or nuns come up out of the floor. So he's grappling with religion and his beliefs. And it's funny, but it's dark funny. It's not like, haha, that's, you know, that kind of stuff. At the end, he drinks himself to death, as you do. But it was a very funny piece. But I was inspired by the playwright J.B. Keane, who someone told him he had the best job in the world because he listened to what everybody said at the bar, wrote it down, and then charged them for hearing it read, which I think is a good profession to be in. So I was inspired by him, and I started doing plays, started this company, Longshadr, which Jane said right. It's the Longshadr, the name comes from where I live. I live between Arcade and Blue Lake on the Warren Creek Road, if you know where that is. I live up on the top of the hill. I look down on the Mad River. It's a gorgeous place, but I don't get the sun half the year. I'm on the shadow side of the hill. So Longshadr was the sign that was on the driveway of the house when we bought it. And it's stuck with me. It's sign's still there. It's just our house, but it's about the light. It's about the movement of light, is the metaphor behind it all. And I wanted to start writing plays for the bar, about the bar, based on some of the people who come to the bar. And that sounds hyper local, and in some ways it is, but I do think it is the future of where theater is going. It's hyper local, but we just did. I know Bird and Julie saw it because I saw them there, but some of you may have also been there for the Lager Love Stories. Those stories were real, based in real events. Now, obviously, we embellished, we added, we morphed them in a more theatrical way, but they're based in real things. And somebody said to me, why are you writing a play about love? It's because we haven't figured it out. I don't care how old we get and what we've done. If we figured it out, if we know so much about it, why are we still writing songs about it? Look at the songs that you listen to on almost a daily basis. I would suggest to you that 90% of them are about love. Most books, TVs, movies, plays, somewhere have a love story in the middle of them. And as I said myself in the play, as the bartender, you know, most plays are written about three things: birth, death, and love. And birth and death, Beth, we know is going to happen. Birth, we've been born, but we don't remember. Those are big mysteries. Love is something we kind of continually mess up. It challenges us, and we have to find our way through it, which is why, and it changes for us, certainly for me, through the course of my life. It's been very different. And there are different kinds of love: familial love, you know, love of ideas, love of things, you know, there's all kind of manifestations of that word. So for me, where I think theater is going is in a local way. That it isn't, theater took a very hard pivot during COVID. One, people stopped coming because they couldn't, and secondly, when COVID passed, everybody had a new viewing habits, technology, Netflix, you name it. It was easier to stay home, basically, than to go out and sit in the midst of people who you don't know, and have a communal experience. That's what I've found from many things. And this side fact, do you know that your breath syncs up when you're in the theater? With everybody in an audience, within a half an hour, you're all breathing in the same rhythm, no matter what the play. It's an interesting phenomenon physiological phenomenon of what a communal experience is about. Um, so the first piece I did after COVID was Mad Summer, which was a take on Midsummer Night's Dream with all the lovers over 60 set in a nursing home during a pandemic. And it was intentionally funny. But I saw this happen in an audience, and it was a little startling to me. We did there were a lot of songs in it. I like music and theater. There were a lot of songs in it. And we did some of the songs at Del Arte on the amphitheater stage just to try them out, to see whether it would work with an audience. And I had Donald Forrest, my dearest friend who passed away, who was also just a brilliant actor. I had written him a part, the head of the nursing home. His name was Ed Duodenham. And every um, phrase that I had heard in the year after COVID, let's center this. You might call them woke phrases, but I don't like to use that word. But all those phrases and lingo, language that you heard, I shoved it all into one monologue for Donald. And he went out to do his monologue, and people started laughing, and then they caught themselves laughing. They almost choked on their own laughter until they gave themselves permission to really laugh. And I think there's something powerful in that. I was thank God Jane called me, because I was involved in writing a piece this morning, and I lost track of time. But the um, writing comedy right now is really, really hard. What do people laugh at? Why do, where do they, because there's not a lot that's funny. If you look at the news, there's not a lot of stuff that really makes us, is there for laughter, certainly. And yet the world is an absurd place, full of wild stuff. The opening scene of Lager Love Stories was a woman who, this happened. I sponsor a race car, the Lager does, but at Redwood Acres, a stock car. The guy is very sweet, very shy. I gave his crew Lager t-shirts, but they only come down to partway over the belly because they're big, big guys. And they won the title this year at Redwood Acres. So the guy who heads this crew is sitting at the bar, and this woman comes in the door. Her dress is mostly over her head, and she tries to convert him to Christianity, which is hysterically. I mean, my bartender called me and said, "Should I tape this?" I said, "Please, please do," because this is a story that you can't make these things up. Um, so it's how how you write human stories. And when I talk about comedy, I'm talking about the human comedy. And this is a Carlo phrase. It's when life is 59, I want to get the percentages right, 49% tragedy and 51% comedy. And when the two push against each other, you get the real human comedy, not just jokes, but human beings who are inherently pretty funny, I think, as they go. Um, so I was looking for a way to be able to make this experience happen that separates audience from their normal expectations and yet delivers a theatrical, live, visceral experience. Because I feel that's what's missing right now. It's you can't do theater to comment on things. It needs to be, I'll use that word again, visceral. You have to feel it. You have to get a sense of what it is, in your body as well as everything else. And I think after COVID, the pivot came. There was a racial call out due to the George Floyd. There was a the pandemic, which really settled in pretty hard, and then there was a leadership transition, because my generation is leaving running theaters because we've reached an age where I don't want to be up past 10. No, I do. I like being up late at the same time. But you know what I'm saying. Your energy isn't quite the same. And it's time for a generational transition. I felt that and I wanted to make that happen. But it all happened at once. So consequently, and then the fourth leg of this table is that the foundations who had supported theater to a great degree in this country um, pulled out. Like the Irvine Foundation and gave Del Arte millions over the years. And that was really to help us do work that we felt was important. Um, and then they just stopped. They pulled all their support out of the arts. They don't fund any arts anymore. And that's become a pattern across the country with private foundations. It's their money, they get to decide, but when they decided that, which puts the burden then on the individuals. You can only do so many fundraisers, so many art auctions, so many wine tastings, so many, and you don't make any money. It's not, none of it is, puts together the kind of funding you need to run a theater. Uh, so I think that all those factors together have caused a kind of real torch landscape out there right now, especially for mid-sized theaters. Small ones like Longshadr, what I'm doing, that's a very my farm. It's not a nonprofit. One, I don't never want to work for a board of directors again. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all, some of you've been on boards and you've been great. I'm on a board, but I don't want to work for them. I just don't. Uh, and I think so. We're a for profit. Longshadr's a for profit. But at the end of a show, like we just finished this show, I will take all the box office money that came in, and I will split it equally amongst everybody. Actors, light guy, band, all get an equal share. Is it a living? Absolutely not. You're not going to make a living doing this, but you will get some, as we call them, whams, walking around money. You'll get some money. You'll be able to do some things, and there's a joy in that, and also in knowing that there is no building, administrator, anything else. This is all going essentially to artists for the most part. Uh, we still have the California Arts Council, though with this current state deficit, I have no idea what's going to happen there. We still have the National Endowment for the Arts, but look at how it's going in Congress right now and see how that's. There has been a new bill that's been introduced by some of the largest theaters in the country, like the Arena Theater in Washington, D.C., the Public Theater in New York, to essentially rebuild the Federal Theater Project, which was done in the 30s during the Depression, uh, which gave a lot of people work. They want $3 billion from the government on an annual basis to fund a project that would regenerate the American theater. I don't think that's going to happen um, in the next 10 years. It's a great idea, and there are really some really powerful big companies behind it, but I'm not sure that's going to happen necessarily in our lifetime. There is, right as I was leaving Del Arte, I had the opportunity. Irvine Foundation actually paid for this to take a class at Harvard, and I am gonna. I hear my grandfather. I said this to Jane over my shoulder, saying, "Don't fart higher than your ass." I'm not trying to. I was at Harvard, um, and and it was on Zoom like this, and there was 100 people, and it was all people were all over the world. So you were literally there are people in every continent. So the time for me for the class was 6 a.m. Uh, Other people, it was the middle of the night, because again, you're dealing with all the different time zones. The class was by a guy named Marshall Gans, and Marshall had been part of a lot of big movements. He marched with King, he marched with Chavez. He was a young kid then, ended up back at Harvard and started a class which is ostensibly in, I would call, community organizing. Um, but it starts with storytelling, which is the essence of what theater is. And the stories He said, all of us, and all of you have one, is a story of self. How did you get to this moment, where you are right now, whether you're sitting in an office or a living room? You have a story of self, who you are, how you got there. You have a story of us, how your story connects to other people. Um, and you have a story if you have a something you're trying to do in life. You have a story of now. Why does it matter right now what this story is? And I thought I would share with you really briefly my story of self. Um, how many of you, and you can, I don't know how you do it, you can put up your hand, I guess, were drafted to go to NAM? Any of you? Any of you go through the draft or were in NAM at some point in time? No? Okay. Now somebody. No, they just turned on. But I was the last group drafted to go to Vietnam. And I pulled my lottery number. It was a lottery, if you remember. And I picked lucky number 5. So I was reclassified, given an induction date. And the day I got my draft number, I was a friend of mine said, let's go see a play. I had no interest in theater at all in my life. I was 18. I was an all state middle linebacker for the #1 team in the state of Washington. I desperately wanted to play football. Turned out I'm neither big enough or fast enough, but it was something I really wanted to do. So I have this draft number, and she says, let's go see a play. And she was cute, so I went. And we went and we saw this play at the University of Washington. I grew up near Seattle. And the play was The Dragon Lady's Revenge by the San Francisco Mime Troupe. It seemed to be all about the Vietnam, like a person in my position. And you got 362 in the draft. Good for you. That's good. That's a good number to get. Um, so this play was all about. So I walked up at the end of the play, and again, I know nothing at this point. I walk up and I say, can I join your theater company? And they said no, because obviously I didn't know anything. And I said, well, what can I do? And they said, there's a guerrilla theater company in Seattle. And for a minute, I thought that meant you had to dress up like a gorilla. I had no, again, super naive, didn't know anything. Eventually, I contacted them, and they gave me like those Vietnamese black pajama kind of things and a sign that said stop the war, and asked me to sit in front of a Methodist church on a Sunday morning with this sign. So I had a costume and I had a prop. And I sit in front of the church. I waited for everybody to go into the church. It was Methodist. I have nothing against Methodist. Everybody goes into the church. I get my costume and sign. I sit outside. Again, me in a costume, sign says stop the war. Those people came out of church and kicked the living crap out of me. And I had a little epiphany, because if I could do that with a sign and a costume, what could I do if I actually knew something about this theater business? And that, more than anything else, motivated me to get involved in theater. I moved to San Francisco. We're talking, late 60s, early 70s, the height of political movements of that era. And the right place to be if you wanted to be in the. Nixon canceled the draft 2 weeks before my induction. I never ended up going to war. Another happy accident, maybe in some ways. But we all come to this work from different perspectives. And I'm not saying that politics is the only way to get into it. But when we started Del Arte, all of us had a political aspect to our work. And at the same time, we were pretty working class. None of us we really wanted to be part of a community, not separate from it. So we got it in Blue Lake. When I arrived in Blue Lake in 1975, I got out of a car from San Francisco. I had hair down to my shoulders. I wore sandals. I went into Walt's Friendly Tavern, which is across from the Lager, and got into a fight in my first 5 minutes in Blue Lake. Now I was 21, so I'm going to be all right. But the reason was I wouldn't dance with the guy's wife. would not. And 30 years later, I'm in the logger and I'm standing there and somebody walks up next to me. It's the same guy that I got in a fight with 30 years before. And he says, "Hey, what happened to your hair? Used to be dark, of course." And I said, "I don't know. What happened to your teeth?" And we were nearly right back in this little mix. But I think part of what will part of what will keep theater going is if it is part of a community, not separate from it, but really relevant in that it references where it is. Um, so, because you can, at one point in time in America, you could see the same play in 50 different cities and it would all look the same. I don't think that's possible anymore, or desirable anymore. I think it's necessary to really find why one is doing it in this place now. It goes back to the story of self, story of us, story of now. And at Del Arte, I encourage them, and I don't, I'm on the outside now, to build what they call the empathetic bridge, which is, yes, the audience in Humboldt is older, it's whiter, and according to some of our surveys, really well educated in Humboldt County. There's people we're in a university community to a great degree. How do you invite those people to come with you as you change and not leave them behind, but include them in what happens next? And I don't think that's been well done around this country, is to say to people, look, things are going to change. That's the nature of life. Stuff's going to happen. It's going to change. Please come with us as this change happens and be part of it with us. Don't leave, don't but the invitation has to be extended. And I'm not sure that was done in a way where people felt welcomed to continue on into the next iteration of whatever these things may or may not become. Um, and that's, I think, a bit unfortunate in that sense of how generationally, younger audiences, and by younger, I now mean 20 to 30-year-olds, usually do not necessarily go to the theater. It's too expensive. It doesn't seem relevant to their lives. So they stay away. When they come back later, and sometimes when you have kids, you come back because your kids are involved. I have now I'm getting too personal. A Danish ex-wife, and my kids are half Danish, which thank God for that. The Danish government put them through college, paid for it. But in Denmark, as a little kid in grade school, you see theater at least 3 times a month, and concerts, and you're in contact with visual arts. It's part of going to school. So you grow up with it as a part of your life. The other cool thing about Denmark is they have something called DOTS, Danish Amateur Theater Association. And supposing you're a dentist and you loved theater but never got a chance to do it, and now you have a profession, the DOTS will pay for not pay salaries or things like that, but pay to make it possible for you to do theater at night with your community, which I think is extraordinary. And these people are just as passionate about it and just as professional often about it as anybody, but they're exercising a passion then that maybe isn't available to them in other ways. So when I say, and I'm going to look down at the chat because I see there's all kinds of things. 362, 3 billion. Yeah, 3 billion made you laugh. I understand. Yes, babies laugh 300 times a day. Comedy, oh my God, I can't tell you how hard it is to write comedy. Somebody put that in the, it's, laughter is physiologically an act of recognition. How do we, when we recognize something that happens, we have a physiological response, which is laughter. It is different in so many different cultures. I was head of the International Theater Institute for the United States. It's like being head of the UN for theater. And I got to travel all over the world. And Del Arte toured all kinds of countries. And we were playing a festival in Denmark. And it was a show called Slapstick that was funny, dark funny, but funny. And we didn't get one laugh. And we thought, what the hell? What we failed. We've just failed. And at the end of the show, we're sitting in a kind of stunned silence backstage. And this Danish guy comes around the corner and he says, you were so funny, I almost laughed. And you realize that there's a whole different, it's a whole different way of approaching humor, right? In that respect. So it helps when you see stuff around the world. But I must say, a lot of Western Europe, I don't know so much about the middle right now, is going through the same thing. Governments have cut back support for the arts. There's been if you can't be a professional actor in the Western Europe unless you go to the national theater schools, then you're considered an actor. But even those jobs now are not as plentiful as they once were. And then that decreases experimentation because people are afraid to experiment too far because otherwise the government won't support them. I'm talking about the professional theater where you make a living and you count on it as your job for life. Um, that is becoming much, much more difficult in this particular time period. Uh, and I don't see that changing for quite some time. I see what people are choosing to do in the theater becoming slightly safer, um, or very political, like checking cultural boxes. We have a Black theater piece, we have an Asian piece, we have a, but it doesn't, there's no, if you're checking boxes, you don't have a real reason to be doing that work in a way that really engages community. I'm gonna tell this little story and then I'm gonna open it up a little bit. Uh, Del Arte did a series. Julie, thank you, Phil. I'm looking at, see, this Zoom thing gives you chats and a city permit. Yeah, well, don't get me started on the city of Blue Lake. It's a whole different world. In the 1990s, we I was living in the city of Blue Lake. You notice that something happened within the population of Blue Lake, which was very traditional logging at that time. The mills were all going, everything was happening. All of a sudden, it stopped. The people that could move moved. The people that couldn't stayed, and that became problematic on a lot of levels. But we did a series of plays, the Corbell plays, um, kind of based in soap opera because it's such a popular style. Uh, about this change in the life of the community. And the first one was the funeral. And Joan Shirley, again, passed on recently, played the matriarch of a logging family who had killed herself by sticking her head in a microwave, which you can't do, by the way. We picked something you actually couldn't do. Um, and her body was in the lobby as you came into the space. And then she came back as a ghost, the actress. Um, and there was all kinds of wild stuff that happened in this. But we did 4 Corbell plays. The third was the wedding. And we used to go even then to write plays away from phones, distractions. It's very difficult, so we go to Forks of Salmon, if you know where that is, up on the Salmon River. We had a friend who had a little house. We'd go there to write, go a week at a time. No phone calls, no nothing. And I was making a fire, and because it's cold, and wood fire in the stove, and I came across the Siskiyou newspaper, and in it was an article about the Siskiyou unorganized militia. And this was at the time of the Oklahoma City bombing. So militias were in the news a lot. So I had the thought, what if we had the Southern Corbell unorganized militia, or scum? And they had plugged the toilets in the courthouse. It was a big protest action. Um, and the character I played, Tommy Dugan, who'd been lost many of his body parts to logging accidents, was accused in all of this. So at the end of the play, this is in the outdoor amphitheater at Del Arte, we had actors dressed as FBI agents rappel off the roof of Del Arte with big FBI things on and fake guns. And they land on the stage and they say, "Give us Tommy Dugan of Corbell." And they're, pointing it at everybody. We had an 8-year-old kid who was a shill. And a shill, somebody you plant out there to say what you want. And he stands up in the middle of this audience every night and he says, "My name's Tommy Dugan and I'm from Corbell." And every night, 10 or 12 other people would stand up and say, "I'm Tommy Dugan. I'm from Corbell." That, to me, gives me goosebumps to this day, is the perfect end to a play. Because a community takes responsibility for itself. And it's actually based on a very old Spanish play, Lope de Vega, Fuente Ovejuna, the name of a town in Spain. Who did it? Fuente Ovejuna did it. It was, but that kind of audience taking a stand. And I'm directing Poor of New York for Del Arte this summer as the summer show. And I was adapting it this morning to make it funny, will be funny. But within that, you want the audience to stand. In melodrama, the form, somebody's got to stand up. There's only 3 characters in melodrama: villain, victim, hero. Villains and victims we have a ton of in this world. Heroes, heroines, not so much, because you have to stand up at the risk of losing everything. You have to stand up, and I find that action to be an extraordinary one, which will be in this play. I'm rewriting the ending. Why not? You only live once, right? So, but it'll be worth seeing. It opens June 21. What did you just ask me, Jane? Is Del Arte going on the road? No. I hope they're going to keep training and teaching people. And I hope they'll keep creating or being a venue for creations, because it's a beautiful space. It needs to be used. And there needs to be, it needs to be open to the community to use and engage and meet each other. That, to me, is super important in all of this. Yeah,
Michael, can we engage people in storytelling by using venues like Del Arte?
sure you
Just
can.
invite people to come and tell their stories or
Yeah,
practice telling
I'm
their
not running it
stories.
anymore, but if I, yes, you're exactly right. I think it should be a venue. I mean, theater is essentially story, right?
Yeah, I know it is. And
And
and can you do an OLLI class to do that?
I could maybe do an OLLI class to do that.
Why don't you do an OLLI class in the fall?
All right. We
I
could,
think it'd be great. I'm not talking about a brown bag lunch. I'm talking about a real life
no, I
class,
know
and
what
let
you mean.
people come and learn and practice telling their stories, whether it's the story of self, the story of the future, the story, whatever.
Well, that structure of the story of self is quite interesting because they put really hard time limits on it. You have like 4 minutes and they stop you at the end of 4 minutes, which is actually really helpful to get it into a set time frame. But yes, that's certainly possible. And I only bartend 1 day a week, Wednesday afternoons, 3 to 6 at the Logger, if you want to come see me in person. But I keep a pad of paper and pencil there because I want to write down some of the conversations I have. Julie and Bird, I know, saw Logger Love Stories. Some of those pickup lines that we had one character who really had hundreds of pickup lines and would try them out on audience members. But some of those pickup lines were overheard in the bar. You know what I mean? You couldn't make them up in that respect. So I write stuff down, and people know I do it. And if it's a character, I ask them if they are okay with me. I mean, I never use their real names or anything, but I want to make sure people are okay so they don't get zinged on the spot in there. But a lot of people in that bar had never seen theater before until we started doing it, where they could stand with a beer in their hands. It blew them away, right? Because it's their story. It's the story of the place they're in. Um, so that's what I mean about being hyper local yet able to extend out via kind of the resonance of themes into a much broader community, and through style. I mean, we work in a physical theater style still. I do. It's what I know. So there is a physicality to the work. Um, I often tell the students it's not like Chekhov coming into the room where there's a long, deep pause. If there's a pause, somebody dropped a line. I can tell you that. It isn't that there's a pause that's like Pinteresque or intentional in that respect. Um, can I open it up a bit? I see names. I see a couple people's faces, which is great. But if you have questions or want me to elaborate on something a bit more, I would love to and unmute and just say it if you want. Better than chat for me, because I look at the chat and then my thoughts go sideways. Any?
Michael, I just have to say again that I finally got to Blue Lake to one of your productions. I don't know why I didn't get there sooner. I'm not kidding you. Everybody who's in your class right now needs to get out there. It was hysterical. I mean, had tears running down my face. It was every second of that production was bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, people were coming in and out of the doors, and there were dogs, and it was insane stuff was going on, and it was all brilliant.
Oh, thank you, Julie. I really appreciate that.
Loved it so
We're
much.
going to do another one. I'm going to probably repeat Love Stories soon.
Please do.
And then we're going to do one called Lager Legends, because I want to keep the alliteration of the title, Lager Lear, Lager Love Stories, Lager, but I also want to look for, there's some real legends, starting with those hats up on the wall, those hard hats, that need to be told. And we have to bring Biscuit the dog back, because Biscuit's going to be in movies soon.
Well, Biscuit and Biscuit's friend, who was that other dog that just showed up was sniffing its butt?
That was I was an accident. Somebody came in, I let dogs in, they met. It was a total accident, which is, again, one of the great things about live theater. Stuff happens. It's not, it's not like a film. Stuff happens and you got to go with it. Yeah. So talk about humor. I'll tell you, this is a bar story. I'm working and I only bartend once a week, because after one shift, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in it that I had forgotten about over the years. But the bar stools were all full, so I was busy on a Wednesday afternoon. I was busy. And this little person comes in and she says to me, I'm with the health department. I need to do an inspection, a surprise inspection. I said, look, you're welcome to come around the bar, take a look. We're very clean. We have a good clean staff and everything, but I can't guide you around. Look at this. I have no time to guide you from place to place. So she comes around, she takes a look, she comes out now, standing next to me, obviously with a question, says, where do you dump your mop water? And I said, oh, ma'am, we don't dump it. We serve it. And there was not a smile, not one smile. And now, come on, that's that's going to go in a show somewhere, because there was just no response. And then she made a horrific mistake. She went out on we have a smoking deck, and there was a guy out there with his dog, beautifully behaved, bigger dog, at his feet in the sun, smoking a cigarette, having a beer. He was in heaven. This is what he came to the bar for. And she said to him, you can't have your dog in here. He says, you take your ass out of this bar. I I mean, he just leveled her and she ran. I never saw her again.
Okay, Mike, I'm up to laugh number 12 now. Keep going.
No, good. Well, it's absurd, you know. And so I saw the woman, I'm on the Headwaters board, and they meet at the county health department in Eureka. And so I was going to a Headwaters meeting, and this little woman comes out of this doorway. She jumped 800 feet when she saw me. She must have thought I'd come in to get retribution for the, no, we're all right. We're legal. But dogs, Biscuit is a dog. When you come see the next play, he jumps up on a bar stool, and as long as I feed him treats, he stays there. He's a red heeler, beautiful little tail, well trained, and his person is in the play, sings a song, and then Biscuit leaves. But it's a funny. I love the bar, doing work in the bar, Julia. To me, it's you're this far sometimes from somebody, from an actor.
I have to admit that I have a favorite bar. Unfortunately, it's not in Blue Lake because that's a distance for me, and I do have a drink.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by the conversations with people that I know, but also by the people from out of town.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you, I'm picking up bits and pieces all the time. It's unbelievable how much material there is, whether you're in a grocery store or just walking down the street. But a bartender gets to hear it all. And the bartender I like where I drink is I know he is picking up every detail of what is said in his bar.
Yep.
Yeah, you need to interview him because he's got some really good material.
Well, I interviewed our bar staff for the Lager Lear because I didn't quite know where I was going to land in writing it. And some of the stories they told me, I have a great staff. I have 5 bartenders who work for me, and they are incredible. They worked all over the place. And the lager is not quite what I would call a dive, but it's also not a certainly not high end. So it's somewhere in between. I mean, but our locals who come in every day, it is their living room, you know, and I give them crap if they get out of line all the time. But this pickup line, it was in the play, it wasn't used as a pickup line, is this guy, he's an Afghan vet. He came in and he said to this young girl, he said, "Hey, listen, baby, I got frozen Costco breakfast burritos, Netflix. Let's just crawl under the covers and watch some movies." That line is terrible. And it didn't work, thank God. But that's the kind of thing you hear all the time in there. And that's why the J.B. Keane analogy for me. You don't have to, you know, you just listen. And people tell you some amazing stuff over time.
Do you have a bouncer?
And we do for certain events. But mostly it's just me, and I have a bar manager. Her name is Yahida Padilla. She's probably under 5 feet. And when I interviewed her, I said, "Yahida, what happens if something happens? You know what I mean? With you as the only bartender in here." And she said, "See those 3 guys? I don't got to worry." And they don't. You know, the bar polices itself. There's been one fight. I wrote that line in the play since I owned it. It was over a girl. And it was this Afghan vet and the young guy, and the vet took the worst of it. I wasn't there. But people gave me a picture of him up against, he got the crap beat out of him. He's leaning up against the wall of the building across the street. The sheriffs are shining lights in his faces, and his body says, "What? What did I do?" You know? But I kicked out all 3 of them for 6 months. They couldn't come in the bar. That's all I can do, you know, is to say to somebody, you can't come in for a while. And if you get aggressive in the bar, dogs too, I'll kick you out. And I'm not going to do that to you. But I can do that. That's all I can do to prevent trouble, you know. But we haven't had, when I remember the Lager is a very violent place, it is not that now at all. At all. I would say you're very safe in right?
Otherwise, dogs are welcome.
Dogs are welcome. We love dogs. I mean, my dog, I got a COVID puppy, and we didn't consider that her legs she's part Great Dane, McNab, and Lab. So she's 100 pounds. And she doesn't like the bar. She doesn't bite or anything, but she'll bark at people who come in because she's worried about me. So I don't bring her. I thought she'd be a bar dog, but she turned out not to be.
Hey, Michael, this is Lou Litsky.
Oh, hey.
Hey, do you have an email list that you could send the announcements out? Because I'd love to receive them. I don't know about these things. And the other question is how many people can you accommodate at one time for a play?
What good questions. Yes, I can put you on an email list, and I have your email, Lou. So I just wrote it down.
Okay.
2, we do 60 seats. Here's what I do. 50 chairs. And that includes bar stools, because people sit on the bar stools unless it has an X on it, which means there's an actor, which means don't sit next to it. You're going to get played. But 60 people total, Lou. And then there's standing room in the back. We did 6 shows of Lager Love Stories. They all sold out. And I put it on Eventbrite, which is a ticket service, and you can buy the tickets through the service. And I let people know if they come in Wednesdays when I'm working, then they can buy them from me without going through the computer, which some people do. But that's about it, 60 people. And you are literally, I would say, a foot away from the actors. Even Julie's even left. Well, my daughter was here because I just turned 70, so we just had a birthday. And my daughter came from Ireland. She lives in Dublin. And Cynthia Martell's one of the actresses in the play, sings a song about the song It's a Heartache. You all know it. It's from and she did it extremely well. And my daughter's sitting at the bar, and she came when we were on driving home, she said, there was a tear in Cynthia's eye. And I would not have seen that in a regular theater, because you're not close enough to see that an actress is is emotional enough that there's a tear, in her eye. So there's a lot about that intimacy of that I find powerful and compelling, I think.
You're kind of like the exit theater in Arcata.
Yep.
Views of everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Christina came to that too, Peter, I got it. Your email address.
You can put me on it too.
All right.
Well,
if you send me a list, if people don't mind, I'll put you, the email will come from Longshadr. Won't come from me personally. Longshadr is the company.
Is the bar closed one day a week, for example, or is it open every day?
7 days a week, ma'am.
What time? What are the hours?
We're open at 5 on Mondays, 5 to 10. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's 3 to midnight. No, 3 to 10. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, noon to midnight.
Could OLLI talk to you about possibly doing classes there?
Sure, we do all kinds of things there. Somebody who did it. Oh, a group of the city wanted to have a complaint session at the bar. And which is, I tried to tell them, once you open it up, everybody you don't want will be there. You know what I mean? And they will complain because they've had, and so sure enough, they brought food, and food is a magnet. I have, people come in with food. I don't let dogs in if there's a big platter of food because they fight over it. But the people come in and have but yes, simple answer is yes. St. Patrick's Day, I had probably 1,000 people in the bar because I make 80 pounds of corned beef and then all the fixings with it. And people come in and we have the pipe band People go crazy on St. Patrick's Day in the water. So, yes, you can do
I'll have
things.
to come. It's my birthday.
Yeah. Birthday. You're one drink free on your birthday.
Hey, works for me.
Yeah. Just show me your
Next
ID.
one will be 80. Hey, 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 woo.
Hey, there you go.
Scary number.
Nah,
Mm.
not so scary.
I
Yeah.
hope not.
So that complaint meeting sounded like a lot of material for you.
Oh, I always go because you just you can't not write it down, you know. And what they're complaining about is one is dogs, that their city's too hard on dogs, you know, and so there's a bunch of stuff. I'm going to disappear, but it's only to let my dog outside. Any of you have dogs know this.
Oh,
This-
yeah.
but I
If
hear
you have a
you.
dog crisis, you have to respond. Well, you know, while you're all here, I'll do this now instead of at the end. Next week, we're going to have Peter Lehman, one of the founders for the, yeah, right. Energy Lab is going to talk about hydrogen's role in clean and renewable transportation, which should be very interesting. He's now on the planning commission for the city of Arcata. But do come, because he helped
Anything
set up
about
the Pat's
energy.
Energy Lab.
So, any other questions about theater per se, or productions per se, or even the bar per se?
Do you ever write for young people?
Uh,
How young?
yeah, I don't write kids pieces, although I will tell you this. Again, children's theater is when I was head of the International Theater Institute, I used to go to this festival in Sweden, which was the Children's Theater Festival, and they would invite companies from all around the world who really did children's work. And every play had an age specificity to it. So this is for 3 to 5-year-olds. This is so they don't lump children into one bucket. They really try to acknowledge what age group it is. And let me give you an example. My wife at the time is a midwife. And in Denmark, you don't see a doctor if you're pregnant unless you are experiencing medical issues, because it's not considered a sickness. You have a professionally trained midwife. And so it's like going to med school. So she got in, which is really hard to do. So we moved to Denmark for a period of time, and our children were very young. And there were 4 theaters. This was Aalborg, which is the 4th largest city in Denmark. And I wrote the 4 theaters. Actually, I faxed them. That tells you the dating of it. No, I faxed the 4 theaters and said, listen, I'm coming to this town. This is who I am. I don't want a job. I'm not looking for a job, but I would love to meet you and see what's going on in the city in terms of theater. In 20 minutes, I got a fax back from the children's theater artistic director. And he said, you're coming in on Sunday. I have a show Sunday night. Please come see it. So I went, and it blew my mind. It was for high school age. And it was about a man at 70, who he was, and he was playing this part, who'd had a stroke, and his teenage daughter has to care for him for 5 or 6 hours. Play's not 5 or 6 hours, but you know what I mean? And his voice was played by 3 saxophone players. He never really spoke. And full frontal male nudity at 70. And after the play, I said, I couldn't do this in the US. It was a beautiful piece of work. I can't do it in the US. They wouldn't. And he said, we are sold out for 3 years. You know? So that tells you the difference of, they take it extremely seriously. This country has a couple of very good children's theater, one in Minneapolis, one in Hawaii, but not the same emphasis on really digging down into. I think it's hard to write for, but it's also, I did a Dracula that was for younger people in Denmark, and it was so strong. I mean, little kids were piddling. It was really scary, and I felt bad a little afterwards. But you know, in horror, it's not what you see, but what you don't see. That so we had created an environment that was completely dark with fabric, and they were on little risers that we built, and underneath their backs of their legs were like little brushes. So when the rats get out, we would activate these things and they would feel things on the backs of their legs. And it worked like a charm. They screamed, yelled, ran. Yeah. So,
And they never came back again?
oh, they loved it. They came back again. That play was ran for 4 years. It was very popular because it was the deal. Go get scared, you know. It was really good.
Okay, Michael, I'm now up more than half the way to my 51 laughs per day. I've
All
just
right, good. I'm glad you are.
been
I'm glad
strong.
you
Why did you pick 51? What's wrong with 100?
Well, I'm working my way up.
work your way up. That's it. One
They
step
said
at a
they're at
time.
40, so I said, well, 51, that's more than half. We'll go for 100 next time.
Excellent.
Anybody have any other questions or something they want Michael to talk about? Well, I have one more. Give me a little more detail on what's going to be on your summer theater.
So Del Arte asked me to direct. They're trying to remake the summer show,
Yeah.
and I said I will adapt and direct this for you, but I must have the band. The band who plays for the Lagerlöscher and worked with me for a lot of years. Marla Joy, Tim Randalls, Mike LeBeau, Jeff Kelly. They are a theater band. They understand how music and theater work together and song. So they're in it. So there'll be music. My wife Linny is designing sets, costumes. Michael Foster, brilliant light designer, is doing that. But The Poor of New York was written by Dion Bicolt in an Irish writer a long time ago, about the bank panic of 1857. And it's about a banker who is trying to leave the he's overextended, he's lost everything, and he's about to flee the country when a sea captain comes in with $100,000 and says, "Can you hold this, deposit this for me?" And then the sea captain leaves, comes back, and finds out that the banker is about to flee, has a heart attack, and dies on stage, of course. So that gives $100,000 to this not good banker, and the play kind of goes from there. It ends with a fire. It's a melodrama, but a funny one. I'm not making it sound. I just was writing this morning. It's funny, believe me. I will make it funny, but it's going to take some. And in melodrama, things always work out good. You know, it takes work, but the good wins out in a melodrama. So we will have that too. So it'll be in the amphitheater. It opens June 21 and run through July 7th on the weekends outside in the amphitheater. Great place to watch a play. Great place.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other questions? If not,
No,
this has been fantastic, Michael. Oh, I'm sorry. Peter?
I was saying this has been fantastic.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much. And you know, I want the theater to flourish and continue, but it's going through some hard times, and thank you all for sticking with it, you know, and seeing it when you can, and because there's nothing like live theater. There's nothing like the live experience.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all. So I really appreciate that and believe in that, and it will continue. It's just what form right now.
Yeah,
Well,
we
I
all
look-
need to have
I
the.
look-
Go ahead.
Oh, I just look forward to seeing your schedule of performances and getting on your mailing list.
You
I'm
got
really
it.
excited.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, thank you very much. This was a wonderful presentation.
Good.
You
Thank
know, we have a OLLI course on acting,
you do.
and it's actually quite popular. and it gets people engaged. I'll admit it's a limited set because people have stage fright, but they do come and learn how to act. And I think it'd be really fun to have a class where you work with them at the theater to learn how to actually do physical theater, for example. I mean, you could experiment with different modes, but I think you could have a lot of fun. And we could engage kids from Cal Poly or from local schools, high schools, I think it'd be a blast.
Well, two quick things. One, I've have taught and directed what's now Cal Poly. But one of the last things I did because of COVID was something called the Living Newspaper Project, where you take the headlines of the newspaper that week and you make a play out of it that's 10 minutes long within a week. That was part of what the Federal Theater Project did a lot of, is they used the headlines as the genesis for things. The other is this. Sometimes you've all probably had this experience. You're standing and you're looking at a cast of people on stage and you say, why does my eye go to that person? They may not be the most physically beautiful but your eye, you keep watching one person.
I've had that happen.
You've had that happen, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can I use a kind of word which might offend some people? I'm not trying to offend anybody. But I was with Whoopi Goldberg, long story. I kind of know her from something else. We're at a casting section in San Diego. There's 50 people on stage. And I said that question out loud. I said, why does my eye go to that person? And, instead of everybody else. And she turns to me, forgive my language, and says, Michael, fuckability. And I said, what? And it's because it's what she meant, had nothing to do with sex. What she meant was that they were allowing themselves to be seen. And I think that's one of the things when you get into the training of actors that is so unspoken and yet so critical. How do I allow myself to be seen? And that's something that's pretty interesting because a lot of people push you away, energy, stuff, action, instead of allowing yourself to be seen.
Well, allowing your emotions to be seen. Is that really what we're talking about?
Yeah.
It could be emotion, but it could also be some people. It's Hamlet's line, to be or not to be. It's being, not acting. It's being present in the space that way.
And a certain dynamism.
Yeah. But you're not trying to do more than you need to do. A lot of what I see is over what we call overacting. It's pushing too hard instead of allowing something to come to you. It's an interesting phenomenon I find in the theater. And one, as a young actor, I really had to learn. They say it's compensating energy for intention. When I'm trying to do something, but instead of doing it, I get all energetic about it instead of just doing it. Anyway, I could go on in acting training, so let's leave it there.
Why didn't you do a class on acting training? I think it would be great fun.
Yeah, I could. Yes, Peter.
I will say I did get involved with a little bit of theater with the Humboldt Light Opera company.
Yeah.
With the SpongeBob show that they did this last summer.
Yeah. I heard it was very good, and I liked that company a lot.
Yeah, I was impressed from being not from here and coming here, and the talent that I saw.
Yeah, there's a lot of good. Carol Ryder is the head of that company, I think, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she
It was very good.
does a great job. Yeah.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. Please do come again next week. Please sign up for OLLI. We need to gain our 1,000 members to keep all our funding in place. They've given us an extension because of COVID. But it's really important that we, drag in friends, pay for them, do whatever it takes. But we need to get it back up to our 1,000 members because almost all the ollies in the United States took a hit as a result of COVID. We went online for the most part. We're gradually working back to having online classes as well as in-person classes. So maybe we'll be able to transition more, but toward more in-person classes with the Stewart building and the classroom there. By the way, if you haven't been in there, it's a wonderful room. They could put a whole lot more than 24 people in there. It's a great big tall ceiling room with all windows at the end, and it's a great venue. You just have to be able to walk up some stairs.
You know what our membership is at now?
Aaron, what are we at? Do you have any idea right now?
I think we're in the mid 600s. But
Yeah.
we're
We need to
restarting our
bump it
membership
back up.
year. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're restarting our membership year. It starts July 1st, but you can start registering now. So we'll get an accurate number once everyone renews. So thank you, Jane, so much for ending this wonderful presentation. And thank you again to Michael Fields for taking the time to present with us. And of course, all of you for taking time out of your day to share in this beautiful wealth of knowledge.
Thanks, y'all.
But it's great fun. So we'll look forward to seeing you again next week and in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you. Great to see you. I got your emails. I'll send you stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Take care, everybody.
Have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful Monday.